Right. So this morning we have 3 more Sundays of this church school and adult ed before we take a winter break. So on December 21st, we start the Divine Liturgy at 9 a.m. And also the next 2 Sundays after that. So December 21st, December 28th, and January 4th, we'll be starting the Divine Liturgy at 9 a.m. So that means the hours start at 8:40. On December 21st, we'll receive Kyle and Brad into the church through Holy Chrismation. So the next 3 Sundays for the adult ed, I've asked Matthew to do a word study for us, a couple word studies, and then Avery also is going to take one of those Sundays and talk to us about the Theotokos in the homilies of St. Gregory Palamas. So I always look forward to Matthew and to Avery. It's like they give me more material for theology. So we'll see what Matthew has to share with us this morning. So Matthew, it's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, so today we actually covered, so Father Paul gave us an interesting word that I wanted to sort of cover more in depth, skini, or sometimes shows up as skinis or skinai. So this word, it functions as tent. Its basic function is tent. It can also mean an encampment. Okay. And in some cases, it's used as a helper word in the Psalms, especially to refer to a position of safety. So check out Proverb 14:11. So, ikiai avethun asithun afanius this dontai skine de katorthu tunton stisontai. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. That's from Psalm.
House?
The word for house, oikos. Or oikiai in this case. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. So this is in Greek. Okay, so the Greek word actually comes from skia, shadow, sketch, outline, or skios. Skios.
You might want to write little bigger letters for the camera for the people who have.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I can barely see it.
But this is a nautical term for like the sails on a ship. Okay. So in Hebrew, the term that's represented most often by skini, not exclusively, but
Skini is from Skia?
yes, or from skios. So the
Really?
shadow, sketch, or
I
outline.
didn't know that. Skini is from Skia. What's the connection?
I mean,
How do you get from shadow to tent? How do we get from tent to shadow?
well, it's interesting. Like, of these 2 etymologies, I think this is the one that I trust more because the skios, the sails on a ship,
Okay.
because that makes sense. It's the same material, right? Shadow, sketch, or outline, I'm not sure how they got that derivation, but that was the...
The tent's gonna give you some shade from the sun.
Oh, that's true. Because it shades everything inside, possibly shades things outside. That's a good point. Yeah, I could see that. But anyway, so this is the Greek derivation of skini. And in Hebrew, the term that's most commonly associated with skini is ohel. Ohel. Let's say this way, ohel. Which is it also functions as tent. Now there are 2 possible derivations of this. This is a this Hebrew is a basic Semitic triliteral root, right? So it can function on its own as what it is, but it might possibly also be related to halal. Halal, which the most commonly used word that we would associate with this Semitic root is hallelujah, right? Praise. Okay, halal. Praise be to God. Okay, it can also mean to shine or to flash, glory, brightness, things to do with light. And the way that I've heard this etymology described is a tent is obvious, or a tent is a structure that's obvious when you're at a distance, you can see it. That it has its own definite shape that sort of shines out or flashes out. Again, that seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. I'm not sure if I buy that one. The more closely related is ahl in Arabic, which could be, or in Syriac, Yahla. So ahl in Arabic is family, tribe, clan. So in Arabic, the greeting the greeting that you commonly use to, well, if you're a Muslim, you would say what? Assalamu alaikum. And then you would answer alaikum wa assalam, right?
Well, that's
But if
Arabic.
that's Arabic.
Even just Muslims, Arabic Christians would say that too.
But well, Arabic Christians would say ahlan wa sahlan, right? Hello and welcome,
Yeah.
right? We have family and we have space, right? It's an invitation to hospitality. They might also say salam alaikum, but it would be to a Muslim, right? A Muslim would say back,
Well,
salam alaikum.
well, the Hebrew is shalom aleichem.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's directly taken from, that's directly cognate with Hebrew. Shalom aleichem. But yes, ahlan wa sahlan is also in Arabic. It's also a greeting. Like it's we have family and we have space, right? Or we're treating you like family and we're giving you space. That might be that's the hospitality. And then here it could be, so Yahla in Syriac, Yahla it can be any of these, family, tribe, or clan, but it can also mean a troop or a company. And of course, back in the day, like when you had a troop or a company, what did you have to have with you in order to house all of those troops on campaign? You gotta have tents, right? You better have tents, right? Otherwise, we won't get very far. So how is this root skini used in the Septuagint of Genesis? So several things. The first instance is not particularly promising. It belongs to Yabal, who was the father of those who live in tents in Genesis 4:20. He was a descendant of Cain, an antediluvian, right? He was one of two brothers, Yabal and Yubal. Right, so Yabal, the Hebrew means stream or channel, which is interesting. So that would seem to imply that people would set up their tents, preferably near a source of fresh water. Then later on in Genesis, Abram and Lot are both described as tent dwellers. And you see this in Genesis 12:8 and in Genesis 13:3-5. And the tent is the nomadic pastoralist sign. Again, it's of hospitality, right? Think ahlan wa sahlan, family and space, right? So so where does this root? I mean, consistently, the ohel, the skini, occurs where when talking about Abraham? We're talking about hospitality. You've got an icon of it upstairs, I think.
Oh, the Holy Trinity.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. The hospitality of Abraham when he meets the three men in the wilderness at Mamre by the oaks, right? It says he pitched his tent there, and he was sitting in the shade of his tent from the heat of the day when he saw the three men at a distance, and he ran to meet them and offered them his hospitality, right? This is a from the standpoint of a nomadic pastoralist honor-based society, this behavior might seem a little bit extreme. Nobody would go running to meet guests, and the guests would come to them, right? But it shows how seriously Abram took the code of hospitality among the ancestors of the Hebrew people who were nomads and pastoralists. And you see that it's interesting that each one of the holy patriarchs of ancient Israel is described as a tent dweller. Okay. So Abram pitches his ohel by the oaks at Mamre. We see that. Both Ishmael and Isaac, both of the sons of Abraham, are mentioned as tent dwellers. So Ishmael's 12 sons are listed batirotam, by their encampments. I'm not going to write that out. In Genesis 25:16. And then Isaac, Yitsham Aholo, pitched his tent at Beersheba. All right. And that was during the disputes with Abimelech over water, right? I believe that chapter 26 of Genesis, I'm not sure if Abraham was already dead by this time or not. He might not have been, because I don't think Isaac and Ishmael were reconciled yet. But Isaac was the leader, the patriarch of his clan, right? And he was dealing with Abimelech, who was the local king, the Canaanite king in the area. And each time Isaac would go, because there was a drought, he needed water, his livestock needed water, he would go and dig a well. And then the followers of Abimelech, the Canaanite king, would come and take it from him. And Isaac, each time, he didn't try to fight back, right? Each time the Canaanites came and took his well, he would name it and move on, right? And the first two times he did this, he names it and moves on. And then the third time he comes to Beersheba, all right? And at Beersheba, he digs the well. He gives praise to God. And then he digs the well. He finds the fresh water. And Abimelech's men come and basically ask him to share it with them, which he gladly does. They make a covenant at Beersheba so that the Canaanites and the Israelites can coexist and each get their share of the fresh water during this drought. But it also mentions that he pitched his tent there. So that's 26:25. And then both Jacob and Laban, his uncle from Haran, which is now in Mesopotamia, are mentioned as being tent dwellers. So in Genesis 31:25, it refers to the tents of Laban. And then in Genesis 33:17-19, it refers to Jacob's tents, right? Where he had many livestock, right? Because he brought them all out of his uncle Laban's flocks back into the land of promise. So the main, where we see this ohel most commonly is, or the skini, is in the book of Exodus and afterward, right? So in the 5 books of the Torah, right, we have, we just talked about Genesis, so we talked about Exodus. This is where the pattern is established, the paradigma or the dedigma of the tent of meeting, which Moses is to construct according to God's instructions, right? That's in Exodus 25:9 and thereafter. The only reference to a tent that occurs earlier than that in Exodus is when it's referring to Moses's father-in-law, Jethro, who belongs to the people of Midian. His father-in-law is referred to as dwelling in a tent. Okay, so the tent of meeting is the preferred dwelling place of the Lord throughout the Torah. It appears from Leviticus 1:1 and on. It appears from Numbers 1:1 and on. It's mentioned in Deuteronomy 31, verses 14 to 15, and in Josiah 19:51. This is the tent which is used to house the Ark of the Covenant, which carries within it the tablets of the law. Okay. So if God is living in a tent, if the commandments of God are living in a tent, okay, where are the people who are following that law also living? In the shadow of the tent, right? They're living in their own tents, but they're living under that tent's skia, right? The protection of the law, right? So they're also all living in tents. Now, when does this change? I mean, you already see it. Like the Hebrews are not exactly the most, shall we say, obedient of people. Already in Exodus, we see like they're consistently yearning for their flesh pots back in Egypt. They're grumbling. They make the golden calf, right? They sacrifice to the idols, right? They're already, even in the wilderness, they're already rebelling against the law that God gave them, right? But Moses intercedes with on their behalf multiple times because God says, I'm going to just destroy these people. I don't want to deal with these people anymore. I'll just let them wander off to their own destruction. Right? And Moses has to keep pleading with God not to give up on them. Right? And God doesn't. Right? This is the pattern we always see with God, that he doesn't, it takes a lot to get God angry. So like when it says like in Genesis 6, the imaginations of their hearts were continuously on evil things, were continuously on wickedness or exploitation, right? That's when God decides, okay, I'm just going to wipe everything out and start everything clean, right? And even then, he finds one person that he can save. He doesn't start completely from scratch. He has Noah, who it says he wandered in the land, right? And he built the ark, which was basically, it's a ship, right? With skios. What's Noah but a tent dweller, right? That changes, of course, when the flood recedes and he builds a vineyard, which is a sedentary thing, right? Gets drunk and exposes himself to his children, and then curses his grandchild. That's a shift away from what God intends. But to start with, Noah did listen to the teaching, and he did save the entire human race through his obedience to God, right? Okay, so where this really changes, like the turning point in the Old Testament is in 2 Samuel, right? In chapter 7 of 2 Samuel, when David starts to dwell in a house of cedar. Okay. And it says, you can check this in 2 Samuel 7, 7th chapter, right? He says, or David says something to the effect of, well, I'm living in a house of cedar while God is living in his tent, right? And this is not when the temple is constructed, right? The temple has not been constructed yet, right? David is already building himself palaces, which means that he's already like contravening. He's already going out from the protection of God's law. And how does he use this house of cedar? Okay, so in 2 Samuel 11, this is another instance where skini is used. All right. David tries to lure Uriah the Hittite away from his tent, his skini, so that he can come and sleep with his wife. Why? Because, well, to cover up the fact that David had seduced Bathsheba, right? In 2 Samuel 11, right? Of course, Uriah refuses, right? And why does he refuse? Because he says, am I going to do this thing that the Lord has not commanded me to do? There you go. Uriah is obedient to God. He's not obedient to David. And then, of course, this action returns. Again, the next time the skini is used in 2 Samuel is in chapter 16, when David's son Absalom goes up to his father's concubines in his tent in Jerusalem and defiles it in the sight of all Jerusalem. So this is like I don't want to use the word karma because that's not how the Abrahamic religions describe it, but that's the consequence of David's sin against Uriah coming back to him. Right. So then in the Psalms, okay, we see that the Lord makes the darkness his tent in Psalm 18:11, and he saves the one who calls upon him by yastireni baseter aholu, hiding him in the shelter of his tent. The Lord saves the one who calls upon him. In this case, it's David, right? In the Psalms, it's David who is the one presumed to be speaking, right? But note yastirani baseter. Okay, in Hebrew you have these triliteral roots, right? Seter. Okay, or yastirani. Okay, the same root is repeated twice, to hide under the shelter. Okay, str. Okay. Now, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but like free association. What do you, when you see this cluster of three letters together, what names do you think of? STR.
Are great. Sonology.
Okay, good.
Stir.
Okay.
Safer.
Sorry, say again.
Street.
Oh, street. Okay.
Safer.
Satyr. About Esther.
Oh.
Esther, who throughout the book of Esther, right, her people are hidden among the Persian Empire. And her people have to stay hidden. They're not secure, right? Their enemies are active against them. But it's Esther's obedience and her submission. She puts herself at the mercy of King Ahasuerus, right? In order to save her people, right? So she's using obedience. That's how she comes to save her people, by protecting them, by putting them under their shelter, right? That's how her name functions in Hebrew, even though like the text would give us a different etymology for that. But like these things can work on multiple different levels. Actually, it's interesting. So we talk about Joseph. The name that Pharaoh gives him is Sephnet Phaneah, right? Well, after Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, right? Sephnet Phaneah. So this is interpreted traditionally to mean God spoke to him and he lived, right? But Sephnet Phaneah has a different function in Hebrew. Safon is things that are concealed, and Phaneah from fatah, to reveal, right? So somebody who reveals the things that are hidden, reveals things that are hidden. That could be like interpreting Pharaoh's dream. That's the way his Egyptian name functions in Hebrew, right? Or it can also function, and I just realized this, it can also function as somebody who releases the things that are stored up, the one who has control of the granaries, right? This name has multiple different functions in the story of Genesis, in the Joseph cycle in Genesis. And The Greek makes it even more interesting. Sontam phane, I think, is the way that the Greek transliterates his name from the Egyptian, which then functions as the servant of the world's servant, servator mundi, right? Because that's the thing we notice in Joseph's story. At no time is he in control of his own fate. At no time is he in control of his own fate. He's the youngest brother. His brothers betray him, throw him into a pit, and sell him into slavery to the Egyptians. And the person who buys them is then Potiphar. And then Potiphar's wife obviously frames him for something he didn't do, and he's put under the hand of the prison warden in Egypt. And then after that, he's put under the hand of Pharaoh, right? Yet in all of these things, he doesn't obey what Potiphar's wife wants him to do. He doesn't obey what his, he doesn't necessarily obey everything that Pharaoh wants him to do either when he takes in his brothers and forgives his brothers. Because what does Pharaoh care, right? In truth, Joseph, despite being under the rule of somebody else at every turn, is obedient only to the will of the Most High, right? So I think we were on the Psalms. Sorry. Okay. Then another key verse here. So Jeremiah 35. I'm trying to find the Rechabites.
42.
Huh?
Which verse are we looking at? At 42 or Jeremiah?
I'm trying to find the. Yes, number 42. Yeah, thank you. All right. Okay, yeah. So the Rechabites. Okay, so in Hebrew, Rechabim comes from Rekah, and that can be interpreted in one of two ways. It can mean the tender ones, tender or soft or like pliant or biddable, right? Or else as outlanders, somebody from the uttermost part of, in this case, I think of Ha'eres is Yisrael, somebody like living in the boonies, right? So the Rechabites, the word came to Jeremiah from the Lord in the days of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, saying, "Go to the house of the Rechabites, and you shall bring them to the house of the Lord into one of the courts, and give them wine to drink." So I brought out Jezaniah, the son of Jeremiah, the son of Habaziniah, and his brothers and his sons, and all the house of the Rechabites. And I brought them into the house of the Lord, into the chamber of the sons of Hanan, the son of Igdaliah, a man of God, which was near the house of the ruler, which was over the house of Maaseiah, the son of Shallum, who kept the court. I set before them a pitcher of wine and cups, and said, "Drink wine." But they said, We will drink no wine, for our father Yonadab, the son of Rechab, commanded us, saying, "Drink no wine. Neither you nor your sons forever, nor shall you build a house, nor sow any seed, nor shall you have a vineyard, for you shall dwell in tents all your days. So you may live many days in the land where you are sojourners." So we obeyed the voice of Yonadab, our father, so as to drink no wine all our days, we and our wives and our sons and our daughters, so as to build no houses to dwell in. Thus we have no vineyards, field, or seed, for we dwell in tents, because we obeyed everything Yonadab our father commanded us. Then it came to pass when Nebuchadnezzar came up against the land, we said, "Let us go and enter Jerusalem," because of the presence of the army of the Chaldeans and the army of the Assyrians, so we dwelt there. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Thus says the Lord, go and tell the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, will you not receive correction to obey my words? The sons of Yonadab, the son of Rechab, kept the word he commanded his children so as to drink no wine, and they did not drink it. But I spoke to you early, I spoke, but you did not obey. I also sent to you my servants, the prophets, saying, let each of you turn from his evil way and amend your doings. Do not go after other gods to serve them, and you will dwell in the land I gave you and your fathers. But you did not incline your ear, nor did you obey. Yet the sons of Yonadab, the son of Rechab, kept the commandment of their father, But this people did not obey me. Therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I will bring on Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem all the evils I pronounced against them. Therefore, thus says the Lord, since the sons of Jonadab, the son of Rechab, obeyed the commandment of their father to do as their father commanded them, there shall never be wanting a man of the sons of Jonadab, the son of Rechab, to stand before my face while the earth remains. Okay, so here we have a group of outlanders, or tender ones, or soft ones, right? Who are invited into Jerusalem to drink wine, and they refuse. Okay. So how does how does this work here? What's God trying to tell Jeremiah when he does this? Or let's put it another way. What do the Rechabites, the Rechabites that show up in chapter 42 of Jeremiah? Thank you for finding that, by the way. What do the Rechabites remind you of? People who dwell in tents, people who don't sow any fields or grow vineyards or drink wine. What do we think of when we hear about the people that live like that? Nomads. What kind of nomads? What kind of people live that way?
The Israelites before they settled down.
The Israelites before they settled down, absolutely. And in the modern day, what kind of people live like that? Bedouins. Yeah, Bedouins. I might also think of Turks, or at least the Turks that are still in Asia that still live that way, right? The people that live in yurts, right? They don't drink wine; they drink fermented mare's milk, right? They don't sow any fields, right? They rely on their pasture lands, or in the Orthodox world, the Evenki or Chumash peoples, right, who herd reindeer, right? In the far north, in the tundra, they don't rely on sowing fields. They keep their herds, right? The churches, the Orthodox churches in Siberia, are set up on platforms. The icons are installed in tents on the platforms so they can be moved around. They always have a place to worship because they can move their church anywhere they want, right? But yeah, it's even on the pages of Jeremiah. But I mean, the key theme here is not necessarily the Rechabites. The Rechabites are just an example, right? The Lord isn't saying be like the Rechabites necessarily, right? What he's saying is they listened to their father. They obeyed what their father told them to do. Why aren't you doing that? Right? Why are you going after other gods? Why do you make for yourselves other fathers? You only have one father, right? But yeah, I mean, this is how skini is used in scripture, right? It has this unique resonance with the ancient Israelites. So all of the Israelite patriarchs, the holy patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are described as living in tents. And then later, the tent takes on this strange function in 2 Samuel as the site of David's disobedience and the wrongs that David does to the people that are under him, right? And then it comes back in Jeremiah as a witness against the kingdom of Judah, right? Saying, you're not listening to me. Who are you listening to? Right? These people who live on your outskirts, who live in the boonies, right? Who live in tents. They don't sow seeds. They don't sow fields. They don't have crops. They don't have vineyards. They don't have houses, and they live in tents. They listen to their fathers. Why aren't you doing it? Right?
And the word, the point is that a tent is associated with obedience.
Yes.
So then, have you thought then, let's say Peter says, you're sojourners.
Wait a minute. St. Paul was it St. Paul who was either a maker of
Tent maker. Paul
Yeah.
was a tent maker.
Yes.
preacher of obedience, right?
Well, in the Lord, as he knows things. He's incarnate as a tent, as a tent.
As a tent. And I mean the point is that
He had no place to lay his head.
he had no place to lay his head.
It was protection.
Right. I mean, yeah, he was completely. I mean, his protection was following the commandment, right?
And it got him to the cross.
But it got him raised from the cross. It got him raised from the tomb, right?
So judge not according to appearance, but through judgment.
Yes. Anyway, so any questions? This is all I had for today. So.
Well, you had analogy with the meaning of tent maker. Is there something in that,
Well,
or for that? Or?
actually, I mean, I didn't get into the New Testament usages. Like, there was a lot in the Old Testament that I could get to. It would be interesting to see, though, like what the. I mean, I would assume that it's like a compound word or like it's a phrase in Greek. So like a maker of tents, like a fabrico, right? Fabrico and skinny or something like that. But I would have to check to make sure, right?
Part of that probably was he found a profession that was needed since he did that when he was in Corinth, which was the site of the Isthmian Games, where they constantly had crowds of foreigners coming in needing a place to stay.
So you needed pavilions to deal with all of the guests. Interesting.
Well, I see it. He says, he talks about my gospel. No, don't believe any other gospel but my gospel, which is, in other words, the gospel that was given to them by Christ himself, who was in a tent. So,
Yes.
And then he talks about the word of faith that we preach. So, what I see then is that the way he's making the tent is through the words of the gospel. If you take those words of the gospel and build yourself a tent, you are you're coming under the shadow of the protection of Christ. And when you're enrolled in our catechism, we just did it yesterday, he has found you worthy to flee to the refuge, to flee for refuge under the shelter of his wings. You're coming into the shadow, you're coming into the tent of the gospel. Your so saying, you're going to be brought into the tent that's been built by the Lord through St. Paul to the Holy Apostles. And who the call?
Yep.
So now you're a sojourner. You don't live here. You're en route. You're on an exodus to the promised land.
That's correct.
So the kingdom of heaven within you.
Yep.